Welcome back, tribe. I got an interesting parallel here to draw from ancient Sparta. We're following an eerie path. So the first parallel we're going to draw with the modern world today is that Spartan women, unlike their Athenian counterparts, could legally own and inherit property, and they were usually better educated. And here's where it starts to get eerie. So women obviously backed traditionally masculine roles in society back then, just like they were backing hard, traditional masculine men at least 60, 70 years ago. And then America became wealthy, same like Sparta. Watch this. So here were the matriarchal duties of Spartan mothers. So because Spartan men spent much of their time living in barracks or at war, Spartan women were expected to run the household themselves. Now, I want you to draw this parallel with, instead of us having to live in barracks or go to war, we now have to work at an office all day for 8 hours, and we're constantly gone, and we leave our women at home. At least we used to. Think about this in the 40s, 50s when that was starting, right? We left our women home to run the household. Now, we know the statistics that women control most of the spending at home, something like 80%. Not sure what the numbers were back then in the 40s and 50s when men were working factories, pulling in double shifts, etc. And the women were at home in the house, raising the kids, turning the house to a home, handling all the duties. She basically ran the household while the man was busy working instead of going to war or training in the barracks. Okay, and then he would give her the finances to control. I need this for the house, we need this for the kids, blah, blah, blah. Hand it over to her. They start controlling finances. Okay, let's continue. So keep that parallel in mind. Spartan women were encouraged to produce many children, preferably male, to increase Sparta's military population. They took pride in having born and raised brave warriors. Having sons who were cowards, however, was a cause for sorrow, and the ancient author Aelian claims that women whose sons died as cowards lamented this. By contrast, female relatives of the Spartans who died heroically in the Battle of Leuctra were said to have walked around in public looking happy. Imagine that. Female relatives of Spartans who died in combat were walking around with their heads held up high, prideful. Okay, Spartan women did not simply celebrate their sons who had shown bravery and mourn when they had not, but they were crucial in enforcing social consequences for cowardly men. This is why I say women are an important part of this conversation we have today with the feminization of men. It will take women standing up and demanding strong men again for the rest of the men in society to back them. Right now, there's a massive wave of gynocentrism washing over society that has too many women backing it. And whether men speak up or not won't change because they have too much support, the women that are backing this movement, from other men. This is the issue. So it's going to take a wave of strong women, not the strong independent queens we make fun of, but traditionally minded women that want strong, smart men to lead a nation. So we're going to see why the downfall happens right now. And the way they enforce this was they have this saying right here. It says Spartan women enforced the state ideology of militarism and bravery. Plutarch relates that one woman, upon handing her son his shield, instructed him to come home either with this or on this. Essentially, you're victorious or you're dead. You get carried back on your shield. When Pausanias, a traitor to Sparta, took refuge in a sanctuary to Athena, his mother Theano is said to have taken a brick and placed it in the doorway. Following this example, the Spartans bricked up the temple door with Pausanias inside. Similarly, Pomeroy cites 3 of Plutarch's sayings of Spartan women, which tell of Spartan mothers killing their cowardly sons themselves. So women in society enforce social norms, which is what we see here in the West. Women are enforcing the social norms of feminization. Why, you ask? Okay, here is where the downfall happens, where we read earlier that because Spartan men spent much of their time living in barracks or at war, aka us today, at work, and women were expected to run the households, which they do today and as long as 60 years ago. Unlike in Athens, where state ideology held that men were in charge of the household, Subluntel argues that in Sparta it is likely that women's control of the domestic sphere was accepted by the state. Due to this, Aristotle was critical of Sparta, and here's the zinger, and claimed that men were ruled by strong and independent women, unlike the rest of Greece. All right, boys, we got strong and independent women here, okay? Aristotle also criticized Spartan women for their wealth. He attributed the state's precipitous fall from being the master of Greece to a second-rate power in less than 50 years, to the fact that Sparta had become a gynocracy whose women were intemperate and loved luxury. Does that not describe exactly what's happening now? If you think about the fall of America, and if you had to pinpoint where the beginning of the end was, we can safely say that if we are repeating this history in some form, then we started roughly after World War II. Around then, America had solidified as a superpower, the strongest nation in the world, akin to Sparta. And Sparta fell in 50 years because the men's average life expectancy was like 30, 40 something. So we live longer. Technology has allowed us to expand our reach and power longer than needed. But the decay is happening. We're watching it happen live. When men went off to 2 world wars in quick succession, when they now worked in factories and other jobs where they were on 10-hour plus shifts, gone from home all the time, the women were left at home, now bored, and with a ton of money and nothing to do. And what happens when this happens? And why do I say that? Here we go. All Spartan women, not just the richest, would have taken advantage of helot labor, which is slaves, essentially, to perform the domestic tasks that elsewhere in Greece would have fallen to free women. Activities such as weaving, which were considered women's work elsewhere in Greece, were not considered fit for free women in Sparta. I don't cook, I don't clean, I'm not a slave, I don't do that mentality thinking. Okay, that's how we see it in society today. Therefore, women were more preoccupied with governance, agriculture, logistics, and other sustenance tasks. So governance. I want the CEO job. Diversity and inclusion. How can we make the world through gynocentrism more palatable for women, more advantageous for them? Do you see what's happening here? It's crazy to see that this was written about one of the strongest nation states to ever exist in Greece, and they fell from grace in a span of 50 years, which back then could have been a generation or two, which we're seeing today in modernity. Same problems, same issues, and the same path is being followed. After World War II, we gained an incredible amount of wealth. Western society was the richest, safest, full of decadence. We replaced helot labor with washing machines, toasters, ovens, etc. Women didn't have to do all the menial tasks for the home. Wash clothes anymore? Throw them in there. The fridge, keeping food safe to eat for days? Cool, that exists now. Want to heat up a meal? Don't even need to cook it? Awesome, dude. That's called a microwave now. We invented all the things, washers, dryers, microwave, fridges, ovens. All that was helot labor stuff, essentially. That's the duties women used to have that would take them all day to complete because it's a lot of work manually. So we eliminated any work our women needed to do. We flooded the household with riches from 2 successful world wars and industrialization and the country modernizing itself on the back of those 2 wins. Then, with that newfound power, women used it to start F and ism. We'll call it gynocentrism instead. But that became a thing around when? The 50s. And then it started taking off in the 60s. So shortly after, in the 40s, we win the World War. Women have all this power that we mentioned. And what happens next? Gynocentrism takes root now. They begin to shape society in the way they want it shaped for them. So women are in control here as far as societal norms go. So just like here where it says Sparta had become a gynocracy whose women were intemperate and loved luxury. Well, define a modern woman today. What is the quote, a modern woman? They're slaves to luxury, to consumerism, to materialism. They stick their nose up at doing tasks at home like cooking and cleaning, which is mostly automated nowadays. It's not like it used to be. And yet still, they stick their nose up. Now they're so bored and have so much that they've begun to turn on men and say any of their so-called problems today in society is the fault of men. I mean, this is wild to see, dude. We're literally going down essentially the same path where we rose to power, riches, and strength in a short amount of time. You know, it's that crazy saying they have about enjoy the decline in the red pill. And it's starting to make a lot of sense because this is essentially a ball you cannot stop rolling. And history does love to repeat itself. The fact that a lot of us think this is the first time in history, this has never happened before, it's just unique to our lived experiences, but human societies have risen and fallen in similar ways for millennia. And the fact that we have a written example of what happens when you create essentially a ton of strong men, when society, women I should say, back traditional gender norms and enforce them in society, because on a psychological level, men want respect, crave respect. So if women stop respecting men for, say, traditional things and start respecting them for opening up and being more in tune with their emotion and more feminized, then where do you think men start to go? What path do they start to go down following in society? They start to become more feminized. If all the women today said, I only like strong men that can work with their hands, I don't mess with these weird skinny dudes on TV, if you paint your nails, I'm out, etc., 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 then that's the direction men would go to in general because of our obviously need for sex, right? We want to get laid. It is what it is. But women have always had this sort of soft power in society where they essentially say what they want and men come and build that. Reduce it down to I forgot what bird species it is, but the male bird will build a nest and then he'll go scavenge around for small pieces of metal, something shiny objects. And then what happens is during the mating season, the female bird comes, inspects his nest, checks out all the shiny stuff. If he did well enough to get her attention, he can mate with her. Now you move that up a few levels into human society. That's what we do. If women are asking for specific traits in men, men will take on those specific traits in order to pass down their genetics. I mean, that's something simplified and then made more complex for human nature, but that's in essence what we do. So society is just headed in the direction of these women that now rule the finances of the household, have a ton of economic power now. We've made their lives easier. They've become spoiled in modernity, essentially. And then we're now witnessing the fall of the Western society, and it's happened on the backs of women. We got too rich, too powerful, too quickly, and we skipped in one generation hardship and struggle, strife, for essentially a comfortable, soft, decadent existence. And then people now indulge in hedonism. They indulge in all the vices. We don't celebrate virtue anymore. On top of that, with the so-called gynocentric movement, we've made fatherless homes chic. Strong, independent queen, I don't need no man is now the norm in society. People literally think they could bring up kids without a father in the home and there not be a negative outcome on not only that child, but society at large. Look at what's going on today. How many more tragedies in the public are we going to hear about? And they're going to keep happening and they keep increasing. Fathers are less and less in the household. Women are gaining more and more power. Society, the social fabric, we no longer adhere to traditions and norms, is beginning to degrade faster and faster. In the past 10 years, look how much the West has degraded socially. Drawing this parallel, when I was reading this, I was just looking up Greek history because it interests me. And I stumbled upon women in Sparta because they were treated so differently. All the other nation states, basically, you're a house slave. All you do is you watch the children. But women in Sparta were treated almost like the men and given a ton of power. So the question now remains, if it took Sparta less than 50 years to fall from a world superpower, you could call them, into a second-rate country, what does that path look like for a modern nation such as America? And remember, the decline actually started in what people consider the golden years, the 50s and the 60s. Because yes, the riches and the quality of life have increased so much, but that triggered the downfall. Wild to think about, huh? How do we find a balance? How do we find something sustainable where both sides can contribute instead of men having all the power and then those societies don't last? Women having all the power, those societies don't last. We have this uneven balance between the sexes, battling for power in society, in turn ends up destroying it. Where can we find a common ground or some sort of effective middle where all the best of what a man is and all the best of what a woman is can come together and create the strongest society we've ever had in the history of humanity? I don't know the answer to that. I do think it comes on the heels of the nuclear family. Having a strong man and a strong woman together, creating strong children, will then in turn, like a web, expand through, create strong communities, which goes up to towns, cities, states, etc., and so forth. But if society just remains broken on the fundamental level where now we can't even talk about what a man is, what a woman is, from a biological point of view. I think that's just another sign of this may be irreversible and the social order needs to be replaced. And eventually it will become so destabilized that a new system of governance and norms comes into play here. So we'll see. The pendulum is just swinging in one direction. And of course, we're going to find our way in the other direction. And hopefully the pendulum comes back and swings somewhere in the middle, because either ends are too extreme to succeed. And it's not fair to regular men and women who have to bear the brunt of these societal changes. And we're already seeing it manifest in ways that society's trying to sweep under the rug, like men checking out, going their own way. Women being pumped and dumped. They can't secure commitment from any man. They're being led down a path where they end up alone with dogs and cats. Everybody is essentially unhappy in some way, because the ideal for everybody, if the system worked and you didn't get abused, was to have an incredible family under an incredible roof with a legacy to watch grow before your own very eyes. We'll see you guys on the next one. Join the Discord and the Spartan Challenge if you haven't already. 6 months of hardcore work. It'll change you. Be a man.